This is the Ring of Honor, a.k.a. Shane T, boy, the baddest champion you ever seen, boy.
This is Mr. Anderson.
This is good old JR Jim Ross, and you are listening.
You're listening to Knockouts and 3 Counts.
Cover! We got us a new world champion!
That might be one of the craziest knockouts I've ever seen in my life.
Knockouts and 3 Counts is the podcast, baby! It's the real deal, baby!
Knockouts and 3 Counts starts now.
What up, though? It is another Tuesday. This is Knockouts and 3 Counts, and man, do we got a lot to talk about tonight, man. Shout out to everybody that came out and checked us out this past Saturday night with our homies over at Potters of Destiny. Shout out to Corey Wood. Shout out to Ken Brash. Shout out to Aunt Paige. Party down there at DraftKings in Troy. Shout out to our belt winner. Got myself a Smoking Skull belt, which I'm not going to lie, I was a little jelly because that was one of my favorites as a kid. But, you know, it was good times, had a good turnout, and everybody in that bitch was going nuclear with what happened with John Cena, Jade coming back and beating the dog shit out of Naomi. You had the banger from Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. We're going to get into all of that, but we also are going to be talking about UFC 313, which it should have been in Detroit. We're going to talk about that with James Lynch and talk all about those fights as well, man. But we got a lot to get into. J-Bone, on a Tuesday, bro, how the fuck you doing, first of all, and how are you feeling off Elimination Chamber?
Listen, man, I got to talk to the folks over at Make-A-Wish because what are we going to do now? What's gonna happen? You know, like, dude,
that was our shot, boys.
I don't get it, man. Like, I get it, but look, the industry's been turned upside down. It was a monumental shift for wrestling, period. And you know what's crazy? The more I watch it, the more I love it. At first, I was like, nah, I can't like that. And then now, after I watched it, probably. I don't know what's the YouTube video at for John Cena turning heel, probably like 30 million by now. I'm probably like
it was 500 million, no, 30 million. They said it was 500 million in less than 24 hours.
Well, I'm probably like 1,000 of them. So look, the more I watch it, the more I love it. I'm here for it, dude. Let's shake the place. Let's shuffle the deck, as they say. I don't want to expect, you know what I mean, what we expect. So I just hope John Cena comes back in like some new gear, bro. Like, I don't know what you.
Oh, he's got to. He's gonna have. You got to have new music. You got to like the whole.
New music. What do you put him in though, Kyle? Like, what do you like? Because
I don't know, man.
Let's face it, he's too old to wear his original gear. I keep hearing
that Travis Scott's gonna do the new theme song, which I'm totally cool with that. Like, I definitely think that there needs to be a different theme song for sure. Yeah, I feel like. It would be dope for Travis Scott to do that. I still feel like he's going to still be involved with this, although I didn't understand why the hell he was in the ring when that was going down. Like, he's just standing in the corner, blowing a joint in the corner, like just chilling while they're beating the dog shit out of Cody Rhodes.
And then he gave Cody a good smack.
He comes in at the end and then just smacks the life out of him and breaks his eardrum. I'm just like, man.
So that was true. Did he really bust his
eardrum? Mean, I've seen that a few places. I can't confirm, but all I know is even if he didn't, dude, he knocked the shit out of him. Like, you could hear it with the mics that are on the ring, bro. He knocked the hell out of him.
You know what they say in the wrestling world, there's a receipt for that kind of shit. So
I literally was just telling Corey that before we went live. I said, bro, at some point, if they pay that off and he ends up in the ring, like, Cody Rhodes is going to knock the shit out of him at some point. Yeah. Like, I don't care that he's a celebrity. Like, if he really did break his eardrum, bro, he's going to get cracked.
He's got one coming for sure. But Kyle, so question for you, Kyle, how do you stack this up against the other, you know, the monumental shift in the industry, the Hulk Hogan one?
Dude, this is right up there with that. Dude, Cena is like the ultimate good guy for the WWE for like ever and ever, bro. And now you have him not only turn, but align with the guy that they had talked so much shit about each other, and like there was such the feud that was with that for it to be with The Rock, and then to do it on like this generation's I'm not comparing Cody to like Hulk Hogan. I just mean he's like that ultimate baby face for them. So like for them to do it on him after he finally conquers, think about it. Cody finally conquers the bloodline, right? And then now this happens. It's like you finally conquer the line and get it over with. You beat Roman Reigns, you break the 4-year reign, you do all this shit, and now what do you get? You get like this generation's 2-man power trip, which I'm not gonna lie, as a Stone Cold guy, when Stone Cold and Triple H did it, I fucking loved it. I'm just bummed that it got cut short by him tearing his quad. But I mean, think about what I just said. The Rock and John Cena on the same side, and John Cena not giving a shit about the fans at all, to the point where he goes into the press conference and just drops the mic and doesn't say shit.
Drop, dude.
And I mean, that beating he gave Cody was savage, bro. So all I'm saying is, like, he didn't just give him a few punches; he beat the shit out of him. And then the fact that they added that the Rolex he hit him with was the Rolex that The Rock gave Cody over a year ago. Yeah. That night when I was there at Raw in the front row, you talk about storytelling and connecting the dots. A year later, he's the shit beat out of him with that Rolex that he got given to him by The Rock.
So, Kyle, here's one thing that I want to mention. So, like, let's take that same exact heel turn and let's do it on a guy that's not Cody Rhodes. Is it as big of an impact? Is it just as good? Is it less?
I think John Cena turning heel like that was, I mean, to be honest, I think John Cena turning heel, period, in the manner like he did would do that. But I don't think it would have been a different situation. I mean, really, if you think about it, the cards have all really aligned. When you think about Cody went up to get him the first time, couldn't do it. Had to come all the way back at WrestleMania, fight his way back to get to the title, and then he finally beats him. Took you 2 WrestleManias to do that. Now you have him come up here and do this, man. It's like you've built him up to where all the kids and everybody wants to see him win, and then you even got him with the go fuck yourself. Yeah. And then now, like I said, he's like, I hate to use it as a comparison because most people don't like Hulk Hogan at this point, and I can't really say I like a lot of the stuff he's been doing either, but he's like the Hulk Hogan figure where it's like the all-American, whatever, like fuck the system, whatever. But I don't think anybody ever expected John Cena to do what he did, and to do it so cold-blooded like that, bro, was insane.
Agreed. Now, one thing this does do for Cody. What's up, dude? One thing this does for Cody is you remember how people are starting to say this is getting stale. This title run's getting stale. It's no longer stale. Because what just happened.
This just made WrestleMania and must see. Like, yes, you're going to get so many eyes that weren't going to give 2 shits about this are going to watch what's going to happen. And that's just a fact. Like, he's not going to give a shit. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the thing. Like, that's ultimately what you want. You're going to get all the eyes in the world that you can on that. I mean, bro, it was cinema. I don't know what else to call it. That shit was, I mean, that whole match from front to back, from that to what happened with CM Punk and Seth, how Seth basically fucked him over to why Punk didn't win. And then you had, I mean, just literally from start to finish, that whole show was so dope, dude. And the vibe at DraftKings was nuts. And then you had Jade come back, and again, go back and watch it. For those of you guys who haven't done it, make sure you go hit that subscribe button. Bro, I called all of this on the show with our friends over at Potters of Destiny. And without any further ado, I told you we was going to talk about some fisticuffs. We've got our man, James Lynch. What's going on, my man? I appreciate you coming through.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. Always a pleasure. Just got back coaching some soccer, and happy to be here and chat with you guys.
Hell yeah. Well, before we
Coach
get into
Lynch now, huh?
Yeah, I know, man. You just a jack of all trades out here, bro.
Gotta be versatile, Can't just can't just talk about fighting all the time. I got more to life than that, so it's all good.
Okay, well, I know you can talk about this one. I know you're not the most diehard wrestling guy, but what did Canada do to John Cena, bro?
I don't know. Turned him heel. The booze, the national anthem, and all that. I mean, it must have just really changed everything. I mean, the world's not in a good place when John Cena's gone heel, right? So it's it was the shocker of the year. I mean, you guys tell me, you guys are the wrestling guys. I mean, this is one of the biggest moments in wrestling history,
This
right?
is up there with Hogan turning heel. Like I can't even argue
exactly.
with it. Like that would be the last.
Man.
Right. That would be like the last heel turn that I could really like compare it to, like as far as like the significance of it. And not to mention that he does it in his last run. Like he's already said, I'm done at the end of the year. So for him to do that and align with The Rock of all people, when you really think about that, when they faced each other the last time and the amount of shit that they talked on and off, WWE screens about each other, and then to be like that. And like we were just getting into this before you came in, but like in a lot of ways it mirrors like the Hogan Andre type thing when you think about it, when Andre turned on Hogan, in terms of Hogan's the all-American guy just as Cody Rhodes is, and then to have him finally defeat the Bloodline and do all that, and none of all people that can be like the one that he's got to fuck with next, it's John Cena. And I just was laughing because we were talking about leading into our party for the Elimination Chamber, which, again, shout out to everybody that came out to DraftKings in Troy. We had like a good 30, 35 people turnout. So good. Thanks for all of you guys that came out. But yeah, dude, I called a lot of that stuff, not him turning heel, obviously, but I thought Cena would win just because he placed himself in the chamber and all those things. But yeah, to see that go down like it did, and like, you're not wrong. I still remember saying this, and everybody at the bar was saying the same thing. Whoever didn't tell that girl that it was a smart idea to sing the Canadian national anthem first, I was like, yo, like they already booed it when you said you were going to sing it. And then not only did you do that, you went right to it.
Yeah. That poor girl.
So it was a hell of a start to the show, but yeah, man, that was
it
was a hell of a
McDonald's
night,
thing going on. We were at McDonald's earlier, and Cena's face is still up on the McDonald's Happy Meal screen. So until that comes down, I guess he's not a full heel, right? Oh.
Yeah. Hey, got to make your money, bro. However you got to make your money, bro.
I guess.
Oh man, but yeah, that was a crazy night. Definitely looking forward to see what we got on the road to WrestleMania. But with that said, we're on the road to UFC 313, bro. First of all, I want to know how the fuck this fight was not in Detroit. This is bad marketing decision by the UFC. You missed an opportunity there. But with that being said, man, I'm really looking forward to these fights. Obviously, I'm super bummed that we're not getting Dan Hooker and Justin Gaethje, but Fiziev is a good replacement for this one. I'm not mad at that fight either. But before we get into breaking down some of the fights, what are your thoughts headed into this one, man?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think this is sort of a top-heavy card, right? You had the main event with Pereira and Ankalaev, which is going to be a phenomenal fight. I know we're going to talk about it here in a little bit. And then you had Gaethje and Hooker, which was like this just all violence, like amazing fight. And we're still going to get a lot of violence on Saturday with Fiziev. I think the one thing, I'm a bit more of a merit guy, or a guy who just wants to see things a little bit different. I would have liked to see a new matchup, because we already saw this fight, right, a couple of years ago with Fiziev and Gaethje. And I think it's going to, be a great fight. And I'm certainly I think the UFC is valuing certainly entertainment over, something different. But, I feel for Gamrot a little bit here. I know I might be on an island here. I'll gladly, wave my flag on this small island here. But, this is a guy that was the backup for Islam and Charles Oliveira, their rematch. Oliveira's out. And instead of saying, okay, backup fighter, you're in the spot, they're like, we're going to call up Alex Volkanovski and ruin one of the biggest rematches in UFC history to get a cheap buck and bring in Volkanovski to take this fight. And what happens? Volkanovski gets knocked out. Like, I do wonder why they didn't go with Gamrot there. So, as far as I know, Gamrot was ready to go. I don't know why they didn't do the fight. Gamrot lost to Dan Hooker in his last fight. It was close. There was that sort of storyline being like, well, this is the guy that almost beat Hooker. I kind of would have liked that. But listen, Fiziev always brings it. He's one of my favorite fighters in the lightweight division. He's going to make this a fun fight. There's all, you got Jalen Turner on this card. There's a couple interesting matchups, but I got to be honest, and this typically happens with the UFC. They really stack the deck with 311. They have certain pay-per-views that they really, put all the cards in, and and then you're kind of seeing the trickle down effect. You know, the Strickland Duplessis card wasn't that great on paper. This one's good, but it doesn't have that sizzle that you're usually used to with the spring card. And, you know, I'm obviously going to watch it. It's going to be a good card, but that's one thing that I think they're going to keep running into, where they're going to have these pay-per-views that, you know, like for this one, it's going to be a little top heavy.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, that it worked out a little more in their favor with the fresh matchup with Hooker. I think everybody and their brother was excited for that matchup. That's an MMA fan. That was one that really piqued everybody's interest. But to your point, the fact that they're running back at least a matchup that we can almost guarantee is going to be, you know, 5 stars again. That at least kind of fills the void, at least for me. I understand what you're saying, because I felt the same way. Like, this opportunity should go to somebody, you know, else potentially, but Fiziev is an all entertainment fighter. He's proven himself to be of that upper echelon. He's taken quite a bit of time off. We'll see. It provides an exciting matchup, almost guaranteed. But to your point, I think it really does lean into that top heaviness. They were hoping for that matchup. Then you had the main event with Pereira and Ankalaev, and that was really a test of, you know, is Pereira going to be able to maintain this run against the boogeyman for him? And I think between those two, they figured they had a home run, like, at least with MMA fans. But now it does kind of leave a little bit more wanting, especially spread out throughout the card.
Yeah, and I think, you know, and I've talked about this before on the show. Like, I just think if they would stop doing, I mean, they won't listen to me. Obviously, they've got the ESPN deal. They're going to keep doing shows every week. But even a small example, right? Like, you take the Marvin Vettori and Roman Dolidze fight off, like, a fight night main event, and you put that on this pay-per-view, it does strengthen it a little bit, right? I know Vettori hasn't fought in a while, either is Dolidze, but, you know, it would just add a little bit more meat to these events. But I think they're just so used to this, like, hey, we're going to the Apex this week, and then we're going to do a big pay-per-view in a couple of weeks. Like, you're seeing the quality diminish on these cards because they're spreading themselves too thin. So again, I'm going to watch this. I'm going to enjoy the hell out of this card, but that's my one complaint is, like, it would be great if they could just, you know, reduce the cards a bit, beef up these other cards a little bit more. And then I think everyone's happy, right?
Corey, how many times have I said this when we watch fights? Like, that's my only thing. Like, don't get me wrong, being a wrestling guy, I watch everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, like, when you talk about MMA, like, I've said this on the show multiple times, because I just feel like back in the day when you used to, and I mean, I understand you have to do more than one a month like you used to have back in the day, but, you know, it really used to feel like every time you had a pay-per-view, that shit was like top tier every time. They tried to have like the best fights you could possibly have on it from prelims to end. Now, again, like you said, I understand with TV deals, you got to have more fights. You got to have content out there always. But I agree 100% wholeheartedly with you that I wish that they would cut a few of the fight nights so that it would leave you a wider a range of guys to be able to choose from, guys and girls, you know, to put these fights together. And then that way, like you said, you're getting higher quality fights. Now, with that said, I do agree with you. I think that this card has a lot of good things. And, you know, it's funny, we're talking about wrestling before this, but it's kind of got some wrestling storyline to it in certain ways too. When you think of like a fight like what we got with Bobby Green, and then you got the Jalen Turner fight, where in both fights you can pretty much say if Jalen Turner wins or loses, maybe this is his last shot at really kind of getting that big rocket shot. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or with Bobby Green, this could be his last hurrah. If he loses or gets, you know, pieced up in this fight, who knows what happens, you know, but that could be like the last of him being still looked at as like the big name in the 55 division. And then, like you said, you have what we got in the main event with Alex Pereira, where maybe did we finally find the kryptonite for Alex Pereira, because you got a guy who's so well-rounded in Ankalaev. Yeah. And you know what's funny? I think of fights the exact same way, like pro wrestling wise, because, you know, I started out as a wrestling fan, so you sort of think of things like this. Mm-hmm. Even a fight like Curtis Blades and Kuniev, like, yeah. I have this theory that, you know, if Curtis Blades doesn't win this fight, I think he will. I mean, he's a big favorite. Kuniev is making his debut. In what other sport would this ever happen, by the way? I'm just going to mention this quickly. Like, Kuniev's making his debut. Curtis Blades just fought arguably the heavyweight champion in his last fight in Tom Aspinall, and now he's fighting a newcomer. You just don't see that happen. That's like, you know, the Stanley Cup champion
champions in NHL playing like some like new team that's come over. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, I think what the UFC is trying to do is they're trying to build new stars off old names. Blaydes has had a number of opportunities at the title, and now they're trying to, try and get this other guy and hope that he wins. And if he doesn't, then it's no big deal because they'll say, oh, well, it was too much too soon. It's no big deal. But I have this theory that if Blaydes somehow loses this weekend, they might cut him. They just cut Jairzinho Rozenstruik a few weeks ago. They seem to be, happy bringing in these Contender Series fighters on a cheaper contract and taking these vets out of the equation that, they don't see as fit for business sort of going forward. But again, I think Blaydes will win, but that's something that crossed my mind when I saw Rozenstruik get cut a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it's real interesting to me, since you bring that up, who kind of gets the hit or miss opportunities, I guess you can say. Like you're saying, Curtis Blaydes, somebody who's been in there against top level proven talent, kind of been argued about amongst the MMA hardcores about, somebody who could be a belt holder for years. Then all of a sudden Aspinall comes on hot onto the scene, and kind of everybody forgot that, that Blaydes was talked about like that. And ultimately, yeah, did his skills not maybe materialize to the peak that we all seen? Yeah, kind of. That being said, it's still funny to me to see, to your point, I still think he's one of the top 10 heavyweight MMA athletes in the world. But I agree with you. He does tend to slip on banana peels sometimes in some of his fights and put himself in bad positions. Of course, it's the opposition that gets him there, but it seems like he doesn't help himself sometimes. And given this fight, like you say, against a debut guy, I think if it does go that way, man, I absolutely agree. I think that's what we see. And to see the way the business is going now, it's just so confusing to me. Like, I don't know if
pro wrestling. I mean, Tai Tuivasa is still on the roster, guys, and he's lost like 4 in a row, but he's exciting. He does the shoe. He's there. Have you guys taken a glance at the heavyweight rankings right now? They might be the worst that they've been since like the Tim Sylvia era. I'm not even kidding. And no offense to the fighters on that list, but it is really thin now. Like, there was that Teixeira guy, the tall Brazilian that won a couple weeks ago in his debut. He's ranked now, like, just because he won one fight. Like, that would never happen in another division. Wow. But this is because they've done such an influx of, getting rid of guys, and again, it's what's best for business. So I think they're sort of going in this direction of, like I said, the Contender Series thing, and then also just it's what works for them, I suppose. And it can be very ruthless. Like, there's they did another round of cuts recently. Some of those names on there, like Taylor Lapilus, who came back to the UFC, he was 3-1 when he came back. He got cut. Why? Well, I guess because like they don't think he's good for business. He's an older fighter. I don't know. So you're definitely seeing it more entertainment based, I think, than it's ever been, in my opinion.
Well, that was a point I wanted to bring up with that too, because like, to your point with what you said, with it kind of being like sort of like pro wrestling, it's kind of like, the old guard puts out, goes out on their shield for the new guard. But like, something that jumps off the page to me right off the bat when you say that is like, let's not forget, we've already kind of started to see the trickle down of what's going on with the whole PFL thing. When, Patricio Pitbull's just signed over to the UFC. There's multiple other guys who want to sign over to the UFC. You got guys like Danny Sabatello that signed over there with Risen and are going other places. I wonder if this is almost like the preemptive, like, strike in a way, if you think about it, of like the UFC, like, okay, if there's about to be all these guys that are going to be out and in the open, like a guy like Patchy Mix, who we've said on this show multiple times, I would love to see in the UFC, or whoever it might be, that's just what this is starting to look like to me. I don't know if that's how it's going to play out, but that's what it looks like.
Yeah, they're a baseball or a football team clearing roster space so that way they can fill those other, they have an allotted amount of spots, or at least in their head. And to your point, Kyle, if there's quality free agents at the point guard position that they might be able to slot in,
That's just what it seems like to me, dude.
One thing, since before we do jump back over to the pay-per-view, since we're on the kind of the business side, and I think it's been blowing up all over the MMA sphere and Twitter and just talked about in general, the whole, I forget who the exact CEO, COO, whoever it was that actually said it, but it was one of the shareholder calls where they said that they need to basically stop doing events out in public and doing them at, city to city, and just focus on Apex events, because that's what's making them the most money, and that's what's most lucrative for the business. And from a TV product, you can't even tell the difference, was the exact quote. I mean, I'm sure I'm not word for word there, but
yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
I mean, what's your thoughts on this, James? I mean, that's a wild statement. It's so.
What do they call it in wrestling when they're trying to BS the crowd again? It's like it was kayfabe or no, kayfabe was the one where you break it. But yeah, it's like that's what they're trying to sell people something like no one believes that. Nobody, not a single person that's an MMA fan believes that. Everyone wants out of the Apex. The fighters want out of the Apex. It's embarrassing, honestly. Like the Apex is meant, in my opinion, for the Ultimate Fighter and the Contender Series. That's for people who are trying to get to the UFC. I mean, there's fighters. I forget. I think even like I feel like Charles Johnson was a fighter like that. Like they had consecutive fights in the Apex. Imagine not fighting in front of a crowd. Like I hear it all the time from fighters. Like I did the Seattle card a few weeks ago because it's close to where I live. And talking to a guy like Modestus Bukauskas, he's like, man, it was so great to have a crowd. Like I haven't had that the last couple fights. So just to like, I think it's their way of like justifying. Again, it goes back to them doing too many events. It's their way of just being like trying to fool people and think like, oh yeah, no, the Apex is a state of the art thing. It's literally this warehouse because I've been there. It's like they do the media stuff there. It's a small building. It's like the size of a Costco basically, and it's not built for it's probably smaller than a Costco to be honest, but it's just a cheap way of the UFC trying to put out their product, and I don't think there's anyone. And here's the kicker, guys, like it's expensive to get tickets there. Like I even know people that are like close to the UFC and they can't even get comp tickets, or if you do get tickets, it's about as much as you would be paying for an arena show. I know it's intimate and all that, but that's what the regional shows are for. They're not for UFC events with like ranked fighters. Like I feel bad for fighters that have to fight there because they deserve better treatment, in my opinion.
It almost seems like a step back. As somebody who's commentated a lot of these regional shows, man, some of these crowds that and these are, no offense to the cards that I commentate because I absolutely love doing them. There will be 3 pro bouts on the whole card. The rest are all amateur fights, and the crowd is significantly more in attendance than what is in attendance at an Apex event. And to see how I guess unused that space is, I don't know if there's a way that they can expand or whatever the case. It's just so crazy to me that's what they're still. I pulled up the quote too, so I can actually. It was Mark Shapiro, the TKO president. He said. The quotations was, when you're watching on TV, you can't tell if you're in a stadium or in an arena or at the small but mighty Apex we have in Las Vegas.
Not true.
End quote.
Yeah.
Any pro wrestling fan will tell you if you watch it on TV, the crowd being that into it and watching them get into it makes you want to be more into it too.
Crowd reaction.
Wasn't this like an angle they did with WCW back in the day? Like they would be in like a smaller stadium and they'd be like, oh, they tried to make it look like it was bigger. Like we saw this in the 90s, dude. Like you can't fool people at this point. Come on.
Yeah. Crowd reaction is very critical in these fights, though. I mean, even on TV, like it plays a big role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When you hear a right hand land and then the crowd goes nuts, I mean, it's like it really drives home that this is a big experience and you're not just some fan of just some thing. You know what I mean? It really shows that it's that big of a thing. But for me, before we round out this point, one thing that confuses me most about this point is when you're talking about the fact that they're selling out pretty much everywhere they go to at record level ticket prices. How is it more profitable just to hold an Apex event when you're making I understand you got to move the TV crew, you got to set up the arena, rent the arena, this, that, and the other. If you're drawing record gates at the venue every time for what the venue has ever drawn for its attendance, and you're telling me it's not profitable compared to just sitting at home, basically, that to me makes no sense, let alone the whole comment of it making,
that's what it is. They're lying to you.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to say they saved money off the fact that they're at the Apex, though. They're going to say they saved
that's what
money.
I'm saying. I don't understand how they're saying that while every time they go anywhere, they're like, can you believe we sold 2.6 million in tickets to fill out, Seattle for a fight night? And it's like,
but that's just it. It's the hard. It's because they haven't been to Seattle in like 10 years. So of course people are going to come out and overpay for tickets. But the thing is, they are saving money because they're they don't have to pay for travel and all that at the Apex. It's like it's like doing a home game all the time instead of being on the road. Like it really saves them a ton. And then that's how they can justify doing more events and doing all that. And who knows where the money's going? But it's like it's one of those things that clearly it's like they're trying to work both angles. they're trying to be like, yeah, well, we're selling out everywhere, but we're also like, it's more profitable for us here. So it's like they're trying to have the best of both worlds. It's like, no, but works both ways, right? So.
Well, another thing I wanted to ask you about before we get into UFC 313 is like the theme of last weekend, whether it be in boxing or in MMA, was, fouls and stuff like that, whether it be the fingers to the eye for Manel Kape or what we saw with Gervonta Davis and Lamont Roach and how he took a knee in the middle of the round because he said he got braid grease in his eye in the middle of the fight. So we'll start with the MMA one because obviously I know you're more of an MMA guy, but what are your thoughts on, like, that's 2 weeks in a row between the Henry Cejudo fight and now this one where we keep having these issues with the fingers to the eye. Like, well, I was listening to MMA Today earlier and was listening to them talk about it, and like Dean Thomas said, the only way he thinks that you could really stop that is it just to be like immediately as soon as it starts happening for it to be a point. Like, I feel like in a lot of ways that's a little extreme, but he's got a point when you say like everybody knows that you're not supposed to do that, right? So like if it starts happening and we're just giving people warnings, like you can't. I mean, at a certain point, there's got to be something that happens, but man, something's got to change.
I'm of the belief too with the point thing. And listen, like it might not be fair, but let's say you do get poked in the eye and it's an accident, you're compromised to a certain degree. There's certain fighters that, George St. Pierre went through this when he fought BJ Penn. He fought with a blurred eye or whatever. He talked about this and he probably shouldn't have even won that fight. That actually ended up being a decision that a lot of people felt should have went BJ Penn's way. But, I think that it's unfortunate that it happens, but it happens, right? And I think it certainly does play. Like I was in Seattle when that whole thing happened with Song Yadong and Henry Cejudo, and it, I could just see right away when Cejudo's like, I could see him, like, because I was cage side, I could see like him talking to the rep being like, I can't see. I'm like, this is over. Like I knew it was over before, like they even did the extra round. I was like, there's no way they're going to let him fight the way things are going. And listen, like I pressed Dana White at the press conference after. I said, are you guys going to do a rematch? He's like, no. He's like, what did you think of the fight? I said, I thought it was fairly even going into it. Like, yes, Song was probably ahead, but it's not like he was ahead to the point of where like Cejudo was close to getting finished or anything like that. And it's almost like he just brushed it under the table. I think Dana's whole thing was he felt like Henry could have continued, and he was just like, oh, screw him. Like, we're going to move on from this.
Yeah, I did not realize that was you that he kind of brushed under the rug like that and kind of gave the cold shoulder to, because there was
two reporters. There was one that he like made fun of and called him like Cejudo. Are you related to Cejudo or whatever? What's your name? Alex? Is it Alex Cejudo?
Yeah, no,
that wasn't me. I asked him about the rematch. That was
that's the one I was referring.
Oh, that's the one. Okay, cool.
I did hear that one. I didn't. Yeah. I heard it with Dana's perspective from a different, so I didn't even notice or hear the voice and connect the dots. But that being said, it did. It really seemed like he not only gave you the cold shoulder, he seemed like he was given the whole narrative of the fact, like, yeah, Cejudo's kind of seemed like he was saying it without saying it. Cejudo's washed. We got Song out of this one. He got the dub. That's what we wanted anyway. On to the next one. That's what it seemed like from at least a fan's perspective.
Yeah, they just kind of wanted to brush it under the rug and just be like moving on. But getting back to the original point, like I think that like it's becoming like, especially with fights that are this high profile, like I think a point should have been taken away in that instance, especially for Song in that fight in particular. I know we're talking about the Manel Kape one, but the Song one, there was a foul before that. Like you got to start penalizing people for that. Accidents do happen, but if it keeps happening, it's going to really compromise the other fighter. So.
And then the fact that Henry came out defending it multiple times, but then the fact that he came out immediately after the fact and didn't correct his hand position still was, endangering Henry, who's already, if Henry was a little more, I want to say if his eyesight was better and he was a little more engaged in the fight at that point and not backing up, there was probably a good chance that another eye poke could have happened. So, the fact that there wasn't even a secondary warning. I mean, Herzog was on. Cejudo had Herzog on his podcast and had like a interview thing. It's typical Cejudo. It was pretty cringy. It was hard to watch. I made it about 20 minutes out of 25, I think. But that being said, he had some good points. He's made some good arguments. I think pretty much everybody who's a fighter and has been in there seems to agree that, yeah, it sucks if you accidentally foul somebody, but I guarantee you're going to try not to, if you know that a point's at risk just because of a simple foul. So ultimately, I think we see so many minute ones that it's really hard. I think they still need to draw a line somewhere. I don't think you can just say that, like, hey, dude, this nut shot that needs to be reviewed to see whether or not it was even a nut shot. Okay, it actually did just graze him, so now we need to take a point because it was technically a foul. I don't think it needs
like
to be
that. That's close though, but a finger to the eye, though, is totally like.
No, I agree. I think they need to lower, I guess, their parameter on where they need to not say that it needs to be intentional. They need to say that it is like it's
either a foul or it's not, like it is in basketball.
Like,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you do it, you do it, because that's the only way to like stop it. Because at a certain point, when it becomes every referee's discretion to what becomes a warning versus what becomes a point, that's how we end up in these situations where there's like multiple things. So that's really honestly the only real way that you can do that. I mean, they tried the other gloves. That didn't really do anything. I heard a interesting stat about it earlier today about that when Bellator changed their glove that they very rarely had eye pokes and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's something to look into. But I mean, the thing is, I feel like this weekend was an overall barometer on how some of the rules in both, whether we're talking boxing or MMA, need to be like held to. Like, James, I don't know if you got to see the Lamont Roach Gervonta Davis fight, but dude, I've been around boxing since I was 13 years old. And the first thing that they tell you is that you never stop fighting in the middle of a round unless a referee stops it. And he full on took a knee and then put his head outside the ropes for his corner to like clean his face off without the rest stopping it. And when you're in a fight that's that close, that could have been a knockdown and that could have been the whole fight.
They didn't count that as a knockdown, though, right? Did I read that?
It literally would have been the whole fight. It was scored a draw, so it literally.
I know, that's why I'm saying.
Yeah, it literally would have been, even with as corrupt as you want to say boxing, judging this, that, and the other. As I was somebody that watched that fight, not to jump in on James Lynch's point here, but I did watch that fight. I was sitting here laying in bed watching it, and to me, it felt like a robbery. It felt like one of those fights where boxing was going to score it wrong. And then it got to the end, and then the way that whole knockdown played out and not being counted and the whole encompassing thing of it all, it was like, yep, that's literally what I felt when it was scored a draw. And I was like, yep. I literally shut my laptop and went to sleep. Yep. He summed it up right there. That's exactly how I felt. What about you, James? That fight, man.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, again, I didn't watch it live, but I caught the highlights and stuff, and it's just it's, again, like, boxing never does itself any favors. Like, when it just, it's just honestly, like, I think that it sucks when, like, people can't just like go back and watch a fight and enjoy it, and it's like that's the focus. There's always some controversy, whether it's a judge's decision or anything. I find it's happening way too much in boxing, where it seems like the controversy is overtaking the fight itself, and we're not even getting to enjoy these fights anymore.
I mean, my thing with the whole thing and the way it played out is just that, in my personal opinion, we watched the whole fight at the DraftKings place once the elimination chamber was over, and like, dude, from start to finish, bro, like, Tank was not aggressive enough. Now, he's historically not a guy who punches a lot for being as small of a weight class as he does. But I just felt like through the whole fight, he just wasn't active enough. Now, the rounds were still very, very close. But, I mean, I don't know. I just had that thought like, he's just not being active enough. And especially the latter half of the fight, I feel like once Lamont Roach realized that he was landing, he turned up the heat and was trying to throw everything he could at him. Now, again, to kind of go back to the theme that we had earlier, in that how the fights that have the story to them are the ones that you want to see the most. For those that don't know, I mean, they played the video of it before the fight. Lamont Roach and Gervonta Davis fought before in the amateurs too and fought to a decision. So now this is the second time they fought each other. We need a trilogy. This needs to be run back. But the one thing I will say undoubtedly about that fight is the way that Lamont Roach's stock goes up, because he's got a belt at the weight class below that. Now you could reasonably see him fight a guy like Loma or Cambosis, or name any other guy at 130 that you want to put him in there with. His stock rises. I think it was dope because nobody, including myself, thought that he had a chance to beat Gervonta Davis, and then to come in like that and do like he did. Good on you, but I definitely think we need to see that run back. But speaking of what we're going to get to see run back and what we got coming down, let's make some picks for UFC 313 this weekend, man. We talk about it all the time. I like Bobby Green, dude. Always have liked Bobby Green, and I want to see him do good in this fight. But, dude, the fighting nerds are some savages, number one, and Hoofy is as much of a savage as anybody that they got on that team. I don't know that I think this is going to go good for Bobby Green, but that being said, part of me almost feels dirty saying that, because how many times have we said that? And then he goes and pulls a crazy performance. I don't know that I see that in this fight, but how do you feel about Hoofy versus Green?
Well, they're building him up, obviously. I mean, this is kind of a tailor-made matchup. But the one thing I'll say about Ruffy is, like, he didn't perform that well in his last fight. Like, a lot of people were expecting, like, a quick finish. It was way closer than it needed to be. I think the Fighting Nerds are a cool story. Like, I think they're talented. They're great. I think people got to turn the temperature down a little bit on expectations. Like, UFC even had a video, like, future champion with Ruffy, and he's got a couple fights, and it's like, I don't know, like, this does seem like a fight he should win. I mean, Bobby Green has been knocked out recently as well, not only from, well, he was submitted, and then obviously the fight with he got knocked out by Drew Dober, who does have some power, but I mean, Green's older, right? He's been in there. This was a guy that fought in Affliction, for God's sakes. Like, that's how long he's been around in the sport. Like, people forget that. And you know, he continues to fight. Like that Grant Dawson win, the one that you're referencing about him surprising people, that gave him a couple extra years, I think, in the promotion. But yeah, Ruffy should win this fight by knockout, but also, like, I don't think it's worth betting like minus whatever 600 he's going to be in this fight. You know, I think Bobby Green could surprise here potentially, just because, you know, maybe there is some more durability. Because think about it too, we're only like a fight or two removed from the Jim Miller performance, which was very good. Like, he actually looked like, hold on a second here. Like, not that Jim Miller's a world beater by any means, but like, he put on a really good like clinic in that fight. And then I think he just basically like, you know, the last fight, and by the way, it's King Green. He changed his name, so I got to make sure I'm saying it properly here. King Green. But I mean, listen, I have all the respect in the world of the fighters. I interview fighters all the time, and I'm setting this up for a reason. I have never seen a worse. I mean, this is one of the worst fight IQ moments I've ever seen in watching MMA my entire life. His last fight against Paddy Pimblett, he gave him that submission. I mean, that was really like, that was a fight where I'm like, you know, and Bobby Green hadn't been submitted in a while. I'm like, oh, Green will get out of this. And it's like, no, he taps. And it's like, how did you lead yourself in there? Like, my thing, when I was watching that, I was going like, okay, well, you know, this is a guy who doesn't get submitted. He knows what he's doing. He's kind of baiting him, but then he ended up getting submitted. So, you know, that's concerning too, the fight IQ. So again, in this fight, I think if Bobby Green is smart and he's not going to get in too much of a brawl here and he's respecting the power of Ruffy, I think he's got a chance. But ultimately, what's probably going to happen, Ruffy's going to knock him out and people are going to call him a future champion.
Yeah, that to me speaks to what we were talking about earlier with that Curtis Blades matchup and stuff. The whole cycle of the roster and stuff is the future champion talk. It seems like everybody that comes in gets 2 wins and does it in fairly impressive fashion is going to be a future champ. That being said, there's something about Bobby Green's stand-up style that just makes him so hard to touch for some of these guys that aren't quite as experienced and don't know how to deal with a lot of the, you know, upper echelon guys. We've seen it multiple times where he goes out there, kind of does that hands low shell style and just goes out there and outclasses people. I would love to see it. I'm a Bobby King Green fan, whatever we're calling him nowadays, whatever he wants us to call him, you know. But that being said, yeah, to your point, this is not a sport for the older men. This is not a sport where, you know, typically the guys that hang around the longest are the ones collecting the most wins. So I'm still leaning Bobby Green because I'm a diehard fan. But that being said, I get it, you know.
I want King Green to win. Don't get it twisted, but I like we said, I just feel like that's kind of like the matchup that they've set up with this one.
Do you guys have the odds up? Because I'm looking at it on UFC.com and they don't have the odds up yet for it.
I got the odds right here. So King Green right now, I always use Tapology because they usually update the odds here. So Ruffy is minus 590. Minus 590.
That's
like
steep.
I get it.
That's
like again,
steep.
I kind of get I get it. This guy's got some serious power. But then I also look at the last fight and it's like, you know, I don't know, like he didn't really look like and he was the same sort of thing. I think he was a big favorite in the last fight and he didn't really look like it. Like he won, but it wasn't really like super impressive. And this is a guy who's got 2 UFC fights. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Like I think especially newer fans now, I think they romanticize. I like using that word. They romanticize too much about fighters and they think like, oh my God, they can do that to anyone. And it's not really the case. How many times have we seen fighters that were overhyped? Johnny Walker's a great example. This is the guy to beat John Jones. And then he fought Corey Anderson and all of a sudden he's like, and again, Krylov out wrestled him. And then it's like, okay, wait a second. Maybe we were wrong about this one. Peyton Talbot. I warned people about Peyton Talbot when he fought Barcelo. Same thing. Ariel's on his show. Nothing against Ariel. I love him, but he's like, you know, this is the future. And it's like the guy he beat in his last fight, he was like minus 1,600. And then he fights Barcelos, who's actually like been around the block. I don't know. Again, Ruffy will probably win, but minus 590, I don't know, man. Like that's a little high for my liking, you know?
Yeah.
So sprinkle some on Bobby King Green.
100% dog or pass if you're betting this, I think, honestly.
I'm not mad at it. All right, we got Amanda Lemos versus Yasmin Sindo. I like this fight, but man, Lemos is always such a mystery on what you're going to see. This one actually does have odds to it. It says plus 110 for Lemos and minus 130 for Lucindo. What do you think on this one, James?
I'm going with the dog here. I'm going with Amanda Lemos. Now, look, you look at that 37 years of age. It's a bit concerning. Her opponent, 23. But she's been in there with some of the best. She's got power too, right, guys? Like we've seen her, you know, she's one of the few women in that weight class that can literally get like a knockout, which is great. Lost to Jana Robe in her last fight. This is the same girl, though, we're talking about potentially fighting maybe Weili Zhang next or someone like that. Jana Robe was right up there. She beat Mackenzie Dern 2 fights ago. Lost to Weili Zhang, who we saw, you know, in January looked like people now want to see her at 125. She looks great. So kind of what I'm getting at here, guys, is that, you know, she's got 8 wins by knockout. Yeah, she's older. Yeah, she lost her last fight by submission. She's fighting a girl in Lucindo who has 3 wins by submission, but she has 8 knockouts to her name. But again, I look at the competition that she's fought. It's not anywhere close to who they've actually fought the same opponent. They both fought Marina Rodriguez. Lucindo ended up winning a split decision, and Lemos actually finished her. Guys, I'm taking the vet here. You're getting plus money. You're getting a girl who's got some power. I will probably bet, well, I am going to bet Lemos at plus money, but I'll also take the knockout prop just in case, because that's probably going to be good odds too. You know, again, this is to me a fighter that is being, you know, looked at as the future, but hasn't fought that opposition. I think Lemos can get it done.
Yeah, I agree with that. My big thing, this to me is 2 powerhouses going in there to see who's going to walk out victorious. Of course, you know, like we've mentioned already, they love to lean towards the younger fighter. The odds do as well. We've seen it time and time over where the younger fighter typically wins those matchups. But that being said, I do agree with you. I feel like Lemos has for her age especially, I feel like she doesn't have a ton of MMA miles. She did kind of look like a little frazzled in that last one. I'm hoping that was, you know, at least for my pick, I'm hoping that was just for that fight. But I agree. I think Lemos can absolutely tag her up. I think she's going to be the little bit quicker one. I think Lucindo's got big power, but she really throws it. She like wings that thing back. And I feel like that'll be the big difference is, to your point, Lemos has been in there, former title contender, and I just feel like she's going to find a way to get it done. That's at least where I'm leaning.
J-Bone, you got a pick?
Yeah, I'm with these guys. They know their stuff. So at plus money, take the dog, man. I'm taking Lemos, and I'm gonna take a knockout prop too, like James said. Like I said, these guys are the pros, baby. I gotta follow their lead here. I'm trying to win some money.
Yeah, dude. I just like the way she fights. That's why I say you never know what you're going to get with Lemos, like he said. I mean, it kind of depends on what Lemos shows up in the cage that night. But I like Lemos in this fight myself. So
I really
that's
think
where
it's
I'm
the
going
age
with it.
factor that puts her as the dog, dude. I really think that's what puts her.
Especially
Well,
at
that's what it
age.
is most of the time, because I think the stats, what, it's 69% of the time the younger person wins.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, that tends to happen more often than not. But now we got the next fight that we got where you got, like we talked about people getting ranked. You got Bahamondes. If he beats Jalen Turner is number 13. So how do you think about this fight? Because this is one of the fights that I thought of when you talked about the pro wrestling side of things, where it's like a crossroads fight for Jalen Turner. How do you feel about this one, James?
So it's going to be interesting because Turner, I don't know if you guys know, he left California. He's now living in Florida. He's training at a different gym. He didn't fight barely at all last year. He fought Moicano in April, but outside of that, he did not compete at all. So a bit of a layoff coming into this one. The interesting thing about this fight, they're two big fighters for the weight class. If you look at the height and reach, Jalen Turner coming in 6'3". I mean, this guy, I've met him in person. He does not look like a lightweight at all. There's no way, he's taller than me. There's not a chance in hell I can make 155. That's crazy. So he's 6'3" with 75.5 inch reach. He's fighting Bahamondes, who is 6'3" with also a 75.5 inch reach. So one of the advantages that Turner has in a lot of his fights is he has that height and reach. He's not going to have that here. But with that said, Turner, again, another one of these guys. He's been battle tested. He's been in there with the best. And people look at his last fight and go, hey, he got knocked out by Moicano, but he had that fight in the bag. Talk about bad fight IQ. Remember that fight? He knocked Moicano down. He thought it was over, and then he ends up gassing out and gets finished himself. So, the hope is Turner sort of learned from that. But you look at the last couple of performances. Again, Moicano should have been a win for him. He had the win over King Green, quick finish there. And then the Dan Hooker and Gamrot fight were both split decisions, and these are ranked opponents here, guys. Again, I'm kind of lean on the side of experience here. I think Turner should get it done, unless Bahamondes, this is his coming out party. Every now and then we'll get a fighter where you look at kind of the lead up and you're like, oh, well, they're not ready. And then they just surprise us all. This could be that spot here for Bahamondes. I like Turner. I'm probably not going to do a bet on this one because I'll just kind of sit back and enjoy it. But, because Bahamondes, there's some potential there. But another thing quickly, there's not a huge age gap between these two. Bahamondes 27, Turner 29. So it's not like Turner's this older guy that's like trying to figure things out. He just kind of grew up a little bit in the UFC and on the regional scene, so to speak. Like, he has a lot of fights. So Turner should still be in his prime right now. He should get it done. But also Bahamondes, there's some potential there. That's kind of the reason why I'm picking Turner, but I also see some upside in Bahamondes as well.
Well, I like Turner overall in this fight too, dude. But it just, like I said, and I mean, really, I think that's been the story of his UFC career, is what Jalen Turner shows up. And I think, like you said, I've heard a lot of good things about him being in the camp that he's in and things like that. So I'm hoping that going into this camp that he's gonna, he's gonna be able to, use that experience to help himself out. We got short time. What's your pick, Corey?
Well, real quick, he came out actually on his media day and said that's the reason why he took this time off, was he used this last 11 months of not fighting to work specifically on his grappling, so that wouldn't be a hole in his game anymore. That being said, we'll see how that plays out. I don't think it'll be needed in the Bahamondes fight unless he's the one implementing grappling. I think watching Bahamondes a couple times now, he's also going to let them hands go. For Jalen Turner, man, I feel like if you look at skill for skill where he was a year ago, I know he was losing those a couple of those matchups, and they were tight fights and this, that, and the other. But I just feel like he was somebody who didn't find a way to step on the gas pedal enough at certain times. And I think it even speaks to what you had mentioned, James, with the kind of walk-off moment where he was so close to coming out victorious in a huge fight. And instead, he didn't step on the gas pedal and just wanted to coast his way to not coast his way, but felt he had done enough. I'm hoping this change to Florida can kind of change that in him, kind of bring that dog out of him and really push him to that next level, because I feel like Jalen Turner he has the skills and all of that. It's just really that mental level to step up his pressure a little bit and put his opponents in a little more danger. But I think for this fight, this is a perfect one for him to be able to. This, to me, is the opposite of a coming out party for Bahamondes. I think this is going to be a Jalen Turner, reignite party, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, coming out. There you go.
I like that.
All right, dude. Gaethje and Fiziev. I'm loving that one,
Cool.
dude. I still like this fight, dude. What do you think about this one? Out of the matchups we could have got, I feel like I like it for the sense that it also gives Fiziev a chance to kind of get some get back. But I was just watching the embedded before we came on here, and I'm gonna be honest with you, like I think Gaethje looks at this as like a next man up kind of thing, and like his last run towards the title. And I think with a fire being lit under him with what happened in the last fight with the Max fight, I don't know, man. I still like Gaethje in this fight. How do you feel about this fight, James?
I'm going with Gaethje too, and you're getting him at plus money, guys. He's the underdog. I don't really understand it. I'm assuming it's
Plus
because
money.
they feel that he's 36. I'm assuming it's because he's 36 and he's coming off a knockout loss and he has a bit of a layoff coming into this one. But Fiziev's got an even bigger layoff. He didn't fight last year, guys. He was dealing with injuries, so he's got an even longer layoff going into this one. And I forget which. I did your show one time, and I can't remember if it might have been the Poirier and Gaethje fight, and I think I picked Poirier and you picked Gaethje, and I remember this because I was like, damn, like I don't know why I didn't think that Gaethje can do it, and then he did the same thing in a couple other fights, but and then I picked Gaethje over Holloway, and that didn't go well. So just keep in mind that I don't pick Gaethje fights very well, but I just bring this up for that reason. But I mean, I just think that like you can't again, you're getting a Fiziev that is one fight removed from that first fight. It was close. He lost to Gamrot. That was more of an injury though. There's that whole injury situation with the Gamrot fight, so I kind of cut him some slack there. But it's 3 rounds. I think Gaethje, I don't think he's done yet. I know he's 36. You got to remember he broke his nose in that Holloway fight, so he was kind of compromised from the get-go. I think a fully healthy Gaethje who had the full camp for this fight, right? Like Fiziev didn't. He's coming in and taking this on short notice. I know Gaethje's switching up opponents, but I'm going Gaethje here, guys. I think, you know what? I'll go something that's probably a little bit off the wall here. I'm going decision. It's 3 rounds. He needs to win here. He can't get too wild. He can't have what he had with Max Holloway and point at the ground and get knocked out. Like he's got to go in there and fight smart. I think he picks his shots. He's again been a little bit more active. I think he wins the decision here. I'll be looking for that decision prop actually because you're going to get some good money on that because I think everyone thinks knockout, but Fiziev's a tough guy to finish. So I don't see a knockout here.
No, I don't either. And if you look back at that first fight, the way it played out, it was super interesting. I know I even had forgot that detail until kind of this build up in this week with all the podcasts and stuff that I watched, like shout out John Anik did a good job breaking it down. But that first fight really wouldn't have played out the way that it would have if it wasn't for one of the judges scoring that third round a 10-8. If it wasn't for that whole fight would have been scored differently. It would have ended up in Fiziev's hands. And even if you did I forget how they broke it down on there nice and neat. But it was literally the way that the judges scored the card. Fiziev won more rounds, but because of the way that, the orientation of the rounds, Gaethje ended up with the victory through the decision. That being said, super tight in that first one. I don't particularly mind the matchup. We had talked about it earlier. I think there was better ones out there to be had, but I don't mind it. I think it's a almost guaranteed fun factor. Fiziev, like you said, coming in off the big layoff, what version of him do we see? I also am very curious. Does Father Time start to catch up with Gaethje? I sure hope not. I sure hope we have at least 4 more years of his, fun top level fights. That being said, I also feel like Gaethje can get it done coming into this one, but it's going to be a tough matchup if it's anything like that first one.
J-Bone, who you got?
I'm taking Gaethje on this, man. Just like I said, the plus money again, and it's a big spread, dude. Number 3 versus number 11.
You're just trying to make some money.
That's all about, baby. Money talks, baby. You know that. But at plus 136, man, the guy's number 3. I mean, come on.
I agree.
It's a crazy spot to be for an underdog. You know what I mean? So I'm taking Gaethje, but like James said, it's probably best to go with the decision because I can't see this one being rushed. He just needs to win.
I'm with you. So can Alex Pereira get the job done, James? That's the question. We've got a guy in Ankalaev who is so good and well-rounded in all areas. Do you really think he's going to be able to keep the roll going, or do you think Ankalaev is the right code to defeat Alex Pereira?
This is one of the toughest fights to call because, again, Alex Pereira, you look at the body of work. The guy knocks out everyone. He's really good. Like you step in there, you're always at risk of getting knocked out if you're fighting Alex Pereira. But there's one fighter at light heavyweight he hasn't knocked out, and that was Jan Blachowicz. And I think this is a similar matchup. Jan, another guy like Magomed Ankalaev that's very well-rounded. And guys, you got to remember, too, Ankalaev's a guy that kind of got dicked around by the UFC. He had that draw with Jan Blachowicz. Dana, again, we were talking earlier about them selling us a bunch of BS. Oh, well, we booked Ankalaev against Rakic first, so he couldn't fight Pereira. That's why we have to give him Khalil Roundtree. Come on, man. They just didn't want to give it to him because I have a theory, too, that I think they wanted Ankalaev for the Middle East, and I don't think they wanted to put Pereira there. They'd rather just have Pereira fight in the States, and they needed a headliner for 307. Anyways, that's a whole different story. But what I was kind of getting at, though, is that you got a guy in Ankalaev who's well-rounded. Now, look, Ankalaev, a lot of people get this wrong. He's not a typical Dagestani that we're just going to grapple and wrestle you. He's not like Islam or Habib. He has that in his back pocket, but a lot of people thinking like that's all he's going to do. That it's not exactly that. He actually won his last fight against Alexander Rakic mainly on striking and everything else that he does. So I think, listen, Ankalaev strikes me as a pretty smart guy. I know there's been some talk in the media of I'm going to stand and trade. Come on, he's not really going to do that. I don't think so. I think that Pereira will obviously be headhunting and be looking, but I think he's fighting a guy who's not only very well rounded, but also doesn't take a ton of damage, guys. Like his only loss against Paul Craig was at the last minute in a fight that he was winning. Like it's not typical for him. And I just think that, when you've got two guys like this, yes, Pereira has the ability to knock everyone out, but you're fighting a guy that's more defensively sound. Like he's got 2 wins over Yuri Prohaska. Yuri Prohaska, not so defensively sound. Like he's a guy that does get hit a lot. He's not going to be able to have that same advantage against a guy like Magomed Ankalaev. Not to mention Ankalaev, can he get the takedown? Can he work the ground game? There's that factor too. I think when it's all said and done and the dust is settled, I think you'll see Ankalaev winning a decision. With that said, I mean, you could probably get creative with the props and stuff here, but I think it's Ankalaev decision or Pereira by knockout. So if you could hedge that with the units or whatever, I think you get some decent value there. But I mean, that's really the only way I see this fight going. Like I'd be shocked if Ankalaev finishes Pereira, just for the simple fact that Pereira I think is shown to be a pretty durable guy throughout his career. He's not. I mean, Adesanya knocked him out, but I think that was more of like a weight cut, and they were both throwing bombs. Ankalaev's not going to do that. If he wins, it'll be submission. It'll be on the ground. I don't think it'll be on the feet. Yeah, I'm going Ankalaev. Underdog too, right? So
I love the fact that you brought up that Rakic fight because I'm actually weighing that a lot into my opinion. I think Rakic did a really great job in that last fight for Ankalaev in that first round and kind of showed that there is some holes in Ankalaev's game. He's not just some guy that can run through his opponents. He's not, like, to your point, he's not your typical Dagestani guy that's just going to get you on the ground, wrap your legs up and hold you in position for, X many rounds. And I think when you're fighting somebody like Pereira who has that touch that we've seen it against, unfortunately Michigan's own Jamal Hill, it just that it literally takes one touch and the fight's over. You're on your butt, and if he lands a second one, I mean, good luck. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so yeah, for me, I feel like to your point, I do agree that it's going one of two ways, like you say, knockout or decision. I just lean the other way. I truly think Pereira is going to be able to find him throughout this 5-round event. I think if Ankalaev relies too much on the wrestling, I think he's going to find himself tired come those later rounds. I think if he's unsuccessful with the wrestling, which I think Pereira has done a really great job in his last couple years coaching under Glover and stuff, learning as much as he can about wrestling. He's already got the striking game down. Where can he go from, with the anti-wrestling and stuff like that? For me, that's what I think is going to be the biggest advantage in his book. He's been training all that stuff. He's already been working on that, and he's got that touch of just, night. So that being said, I truly lean towards Pereira. I think for Ankalaev, he has to be perfect for 5 rounds or find a way to stifle him and really tie him up. And I just don't think this version of Poatan is the same one that we've seen fight Jan and stuff like that. I think this is a kind of upgraded version now that he's been at 205 for a while, defended his belt for a minute. I think he's going to go out there and put another guy to sleep. That's what I think comes Saturday night.
You going the same way, J-Bone?
And it's hard to go against Pereira at this point, ain't it? I mean, like you said, Ankalaev's got to have the perfect fight, and I don't think Pereira allows him to do so. So keep it short and sweet. I'm taking Pereira by TKO, man.
Yeah, dude. I think Ankalaev's got the code to do it. As far as like his overall skill set, like James said, but I think that Ankalaev has a chip on his shoulder in terms of he wants to show people that he's on that level because, like we've already said, he's been disrespected as far as like how long it's taken him to get him a title shot. Same way like we talked about with a guy like Bilal Muhammad. But with that being said, I kind of tend to lean more towards like what Corey was saying in terms of I feel like Poatan's wrestling defense has gotten good enough that he would be able to keep it on the feet. And I do think, even though all of us can agree the best game plan for Ankalaev is to try to wrestle him. But with that being said, I think there's part of him that wants to show that he can, stand at least to some degree with Poatan, which if that's what he tries to do, I think plays into his downfall eventually, even though he is very well-rounded. Like you said, I think we can all agree kickboxing wise, Poatan's on a different level. For that reason, I think Poatan's going to win. But if there were a guy that can crack that code, Ankalaev would be the one to do it. But James, we've had you for a while, dude. I appreciate the time as always. If you want, the table is open. Any big interviews you got coming up over on your channel as well?
Well, guy, you guys know, should be doing something this week. We're still figuring out the schedule. Looks like I'll be getting Jamal Hill again, so keep an eye out for that one. They just announced his fight with Cleo Roundtree, so I believe this is one of the first interviews he's done, which is cool. Working on a few more. Quickly, another Michigan guy I talked to, because I know this is a Michigan show. Justin James is fighting this weekend for Fusion Fight League in Bare Knuckles. He's fighting Lloyd Mix. You know, Lloyd Mix is actually Lloyd Woodard, if you remember him in Bellator back in the day in the tournament. He changed his last name. I guess he took his wife's last name recently, so they're fighting. There's a whole grudge match angle here. You guys would love this pro wrestling wise. I'll give you the quick version and then I'll get out of here. But basically, James does commentary for Fusion. He commentated one of Lloyd Mix's fights. Lloyd heard it, didn't like the commentary, got in his face at another event. Justin James was like, okay, well, let's settle right now. And then there was a promoter who came in and said, let's just book the fight. We'll make it bare knuckle. So they're fighting this weekend and it's going to be great. I interviewed both guys. You can find those interviews on Spectation Sports. I love stuff like this. I think it's cool. Justin James, I'm sure you guys have talked to him. One of the coolest guys, nicest guys in this industry. He's got a podcast coming out, or has a podcast that he does every week as well too, so go check that out. Just wanted to mention that. At Lynch on Sports, everything, Twitter, Instagram, I still call it Twitter, TikTok, you name it, YouTube, of course, always doing my stuff there, and love doing the show, guys. Thanks as always for having me on, and keep up the awesome work.
Hell yeah, man. We appreciate it. Shout out to Justin James, man. I actually stayed with James the last time I was in Vegas. We were talking to him about this fight. So nice. I am looking forward to seeing what's going on with that. And for anybody that's been paying attention to the Michigan fight scene, our main event for the next Legends of Combat show has been announced, as well as Devin Smith is coming home to Michigan to fight Reese Brink, which that's a fight for anybody that's from around here knows it's been a fight.
Huge
that's
fight
been
for Michigan.
For a while.
If you've been following that, I mean that like, to see that put together. Shout out to Matt Frendo, really good stuff there, putting that card together, and that's again on Spectation. That's a company I work for, so they'll be streaming that fight too, guys.
As do we. We'll be on commentary for that. Corey and I will be your voices
sweet.
for that
Okay,
fight.
cool.
So
nice.
We are the voices of Legends of Combat, formerly Lights Out. Shout out to Mitten Muay Thai. I want to give them a shout out while we're out here. They had a hell of a fight, 2 spinning back fist knockouts. About lost my shit on the second one. Beautiful. And yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it. Also, March 15th, if you're coming down to Motor City for the fights, for the MMA fights, Aaron Ward, past guest of the show, will be in the cage as well. And I will be on the commentary with past guest of the show, Kara Rowe. So make sure you hit that button. Until next time, in any between time, peace.